Hi everyone, I'm going to do a book review on The Haunting of Morsley Manor. Now, there's a massive problem with this book. The story itself I'll get to in a minute. It's a pretty cool cover. Obviously red stands out and a big fat massive infected green eye. But there are so many formatting and editing issues with this book. I'm really surprised that it was allowed to go out with so many problems in it. Did no one proofread it at the little indie publishing house that puts this out? I came across so many. First one, they cut the sentence to another line. That's bad formatting. How did no one find that out? How did no one see that? I think that's the only time that happened. There are other issues such as extra quote marks in the middle of someone speaking. So they're not speaking, pausing, speaking. It's just one, sentence after sentence, and they've added the extra quote marks. Well, that should have been cut out in editing. I mean, come on. There were issues where two people were talking in the same paragraph. You don't do that. Not unless they speak in unison, sort of thing. But in this paragraph that I've managed to find, there are several. It got quite confusing as to who was speaking. Eric, at first it's about Eric, but then at the end of the paragraph she's speaking and then he speaks again. No, you need to divide them into separate paragraphs. Really. And then there are a couple of issues where there are gaps between the quote marks and the word. Also could have been caught in editing. Look, am I nitpicking all this? Sure. But for, a little indie publisher, you should also go through the same, number of edits that everyone else does at trade publishing. And then there was a problem. The story really wasn't checked. Chapter 37. You've got Eric standing up. I should get my glasses. You got Eric standing up when the detective comes along. Because it says, what kind of person would I be if I hadn't come? Eric rose from his chair. What has she said? The detective then talks, and then we go to the next page. And then it says, Morgan, who's the detective, beckoned for Eric to stand and directed him through a pair of double doors. Eric was already standing just 2 paragraphs ago. So it's little weird things like that people do pick up on when they read books. And, if you guys want to be a decent indie publishing house, then you should have picked up on all of those mistakes, formatting and editing. So that was the worst part of this book. The story itself, it was a mix of good and bad. The good stuff was the haunting of the manor and all of the ghosts and, the creepy clown ghost who was a pedophile and Mrs. Morsley who stood at the top of the stairs in her black dress and inhabited the actress who was pretending to be her. And then there was the poor young girl who had died just, okay, that was another problem, who had died not long before that. Her ghost was there. And then there was the ghost of all the other kids that had died in the house. So, the haunting ghosty part was actually pretty good. But the story around it between Eric and Mikey, as he called him, I grew up together in an orphanage. He gave him his surname of Good, so it was Michael Good. Ended up turning into Michelle Snow. So then there's a problem. So then, Eric knows him as Mikey. So there's this whole, you're just an arrogant a-hole, blah, blah, blah. I could have done without that storyline. I don't think it made it any better. I think it just kind of added an extra layer of crap I didn't need to read about. I think it took away from the story of the Haunting of Morsley Manor. So, look, that's all going to be down to the author and the publishing house. Now, the other thing I was just going to pull up on, they did the prologue, which was set in 2015. And then they cut to chapter 1, if I can get there. Should have marked it off. Get my rings out of the way. They're all getting caught on the book. And then we jump to 2013. So we've gone back 2 years to North Carolina in America. But then we jump back to 2015. So we've gone from 15 back to 13, back to... You could have just reorganised the chapters better than that and just had that, chapter 1 as the beginning and then the prologue in 2015 as to one of the reasons that kind of leads him there, sort of thing. So... Story-wise, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. the main part of the story, which was the haunting of the manor and the possession of the actors playing the people, was a good one. Made it kind of scary. But the rest of the story was just, oh God, really? And the formatting and editing issues just kind of turns me off when I'm reading a book, because it's like, come on, you're supposed to be a publishing house. You know how to do this better. So, you know, indies and self-published authors get ripped apart for all the crap, you know, they leave in their books. But when you've got a trad book that's just as bad. So that's The Haunting at Morsley Manor by George Morris Death. I don't know, however that's pronounced, but on Instagram it's just Death. So, look, if that sort of stuff is your style, give it a read. But you'll probably come across the same problems I did and be turned off by it. Who knows, maybe you don't care. So it's The Haunting at Morsley Manor. 7 out of 10.